precious name of our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. The word religion, I gave you a saying last week, so this week I'll simplify it and just give you a word. The word religion, you've heard this, I don't know how many thousands of times throughout your life. And we all feel like we know what it means, right? We understand the word religion. It's not a foreign word to us. We hear the word, and in our mind, we know what the meaning of that word is. Religion is a lot of things, but one of the biggest things that it is a category. Yes? So Christianity, our religious category, fits in line with the religions of the world. So the three Western religions we are familiar with, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, are the monotheistic religions. That is, their system is built around the belief that there is a God. There is a single God. The Eastern religions are built around different concepts. So you have Hinduism, you have Buddhism, you have Confucianism, and these are built around beliefs in different things. In some cases, many gods. In some cases, a God. And in some cases, no God. We have modern religious categories as well. We have secularism, which is the belief in us and in the way that we as human beings do things. We're familiar with atheism, the belief that there is no God. Marxism is a religious system built around the God of government, the God of doing things in community. So there are a lot of things that slot into that word religion. But of course, coming from our background, we hear the word religion in a certain way. Okay? One of the things that religions, no matter what they are, have in common is that you have some origin story which explains either that there is one superior or supreme being, or there are many supreme beings, or there is no supreme being. So you have some authority, and that authority is either a divine being or it is no being. And that means the divine authority is you and me. Okay, so you have that, and then in line with that, you have a belief in what the biggest problem of humanity is. So each religion defines what the biggest problem of humanity is. In our case, in the case of the Christian category, the biggest problem that humanity has is moral rebellion. That is, we have rebelled against the God who is the supreme being, the authority of our faith. So that is the authority of our faith, and this is our biggest problem. So to give a different example, the Hindu believes that the supreme being is called Brahman. And the Brahman is not a person, it is not a thing. The Brahman is everything. Okay, so everything is Brahman. And therefore, the biggest problem that you and I have is that we are ignorant of our place in the Brahman, if that makes sense to you. So if everything in the universe is God, then you have a place within that Brahman, and your difficulty, and the reason that you have problems in life, is because you haven't figured out where you fit yet. If you go throughout your life and you somehow figure out your spot, and you can get yourself into that spot, then all is well. Okay? When you get into Buddhism, you have an entirely different story. Confucianism, a different story. Shinto, Taoism, a different story. And each of these groups has a divine aspect and the biggest problem that humans face. And what happens in all religious categories is that they take those two parts of the equation. They say, authority, problem, how do we solve that problem? What doctrine can we create to solve that problem? So a more familiar example for us would be Judaism. Now Judaism, it was pretty easy for them because God said, you're my guys, I'm your God. And here's how the relationship is going to work. You will do this, 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 and this. You will not do that, that, and that. And I will in turn do this and this. So it's pretty simple. It established that Yahweh, or God, was the supreme being, authority, creator of everything. So therefore he gets to set the rules. So God communicates his rules mainly through Moses. The rules are laid out, and there you go. You obey the rules, and everything's hunky-dory, right? Yeah, say right. Say yes, you're correct. But now here's the problem. In all these religious categories, we get involved. People get involved. And again, using Israel as our example, not 5 seconds after God gave them the rules, what did they do? They started finding ways around the rules, didn't they? They started finding, well, God says don't do this, but what he really meant was, don't do this, like this, around this, on this day. And they began finding ways around the rules, or, here's what we're really expert at. When we're not finding ways around the rules, you and I, are experts at justifying to ourselves and to everybody else why we broke the rules. Listen, you don't understand why I had to covet, my neighbor's donkey. You just don't understand it. And so we make allowances for that. So anytime you have a divine authority and then an understanding of humanity's biggest problem, and then you create a set of rules and doctrines around it, it lasts exactly 5 seconds, and you and I, as human beings, are finding our way around it. Come on, it's true. You know this is true. If I told you all to do something right now, it wouldn't be but 2 seconds before one of you would say, I'm not doing that. And you would have a perfectly good reason why you're not doing it. You'd be able to justify it to the person sitting next, and we'd all work it out. That's the way we are as human beings. Thus, our understanding of humanity's biggest problem is that we are basically rebellious. We are basically rebellious against the divine authority. And this is why when Jesus came along, he didn't come along and get all his guys together and say, here's the rules. He didn't come along and say, here's the 300 new rules. Forget that stuff over there. You already failed at that. Here are the 300 new rules that you have to follow. He didn't do that because Jesus knows our biggest problem is not following the rules. Our biggest problem is right here. It's us, and it's what's inside of us. It is our naturally rebellious heart. We see a rule, and to us, it's something to be figured out how to get around it. Okay? So Jesus doesn't come along and say, here's the new rule book. Jesus comes, and he very simply says, follow me. Follow me. Whatever you see me doing, you do. However you see me treating other people, you treat other people the same way. However you see me honoring the Father, you honor the Father that way. Just follow me. Now, his guys are coming along, and we know his guys, right? They're struggling as they're trying to follow him because they see what he's doing. They see that he's treating everybody the same. They see that he is honoring the poor. They see that he is doing things that seem to be contradictory to Judaism. They see all this, but in their little heart of hearts, they struggle. It's, well, give us a rule, Jesus. Tell us exactly how to do this so we can figure out how not to do it. But Jesus says, just follow me, follow me. Finally, one of them says, listen, man. Somebody comes up and says, okay, what's the most important rule? And Jesus is looking at him, and in his mind he's going, I told you the most important rule. Just follow me. But, okay, you need a rule. Here's the most important rule. You ready for this? The most important rule. Love God and love your neighbor as yourself. And then there's a big old period. Love God, love your neighbor. And you can almost see the wind going out of that poor guy's sails. Like, how am I going to get around that? Right? Love God, love your neighbor. Because watch what happens. If you love God and you love your neighbor, as you see Jesus loving God and loving his neighbors, if you do this, then none of the other rules are necessary anymore. If you love God, you will honor him. If you love God, you will bring glory to his name. If you love God, you will proclaim what God has done for you. That seems simple. If you love your neighbor the way that you see Jesus is doing, well, you're not going to murder your neighbor. If you love your neighbor, you are not going to steal his stuff. If you love your neighbor, you are not going to covet his husband or his wife or her wife. Okay, you know how that works, right? It's the modern age, but you're not going to cover their spouse. There, I made it work. You will not covet their spouse. You will not do any of the things that might injure your neighbor. And you see, this is the core of what Jesus is about. He doesn't come along and create new categories of rules. He doesn't say, do all the 600 things that the Pharisees have established. He doesn't say any of that. He just says, love your neighbor. Love your neighbor the same way you love yourself. Love God, love your neighbor. Now, people still struggle with that. The history of the church is one in which people have tried to create doctrine and practice to force you to love your neighbor. In Sunday school today, Karma was establishing doctrine right and left. She's saying, this is the way it's going to be from this. And she did it with the best purpose in mind. She said, if you do what I say, this is Karma speaking, if you do what I say, you will love your neighbor without question. Okay? And of course, what happened? As soon as Karma established the boundaries of her doctrine, old Rob over there was trying to find ways around those boundaries. No matter how high we build the fence, we try to get around them here. So Jesus doesn't establish rules. He just says, do this. Follow me and do this. The reason that we have a struggle with that is because it requires extraordinary faith to just follow Jesus. In some ways, some of the other religious categories are easier for us to follow. You follow the rule book, you get the rules out, you check yourself every day. Am I doing this? Am I not doing this? Okay, check, 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 check. I'm cool. I can get on with my life. But for the Christian, for the person intent upon following Jesus, you have to take by faith that what he says is going to lead to the best life that you can have. He says, no rules, just this. Follow me. Do what you see me doing. Do what I tell you to do. Love God, love your neighbors. Without equivocation, without category, without justifying why you don't love all these things. Simply love your neighbors and love God. We hear that and we say, well, you say that'll give me my best life, and Jesus says, trust me. Just trust me. Well, no, I want a rule. I want a rule so I can check it every day. He said, here's your rule. Do you love your neighbor? Do you love God? But again, we want things to be more codified. And again, once we codify things, once we begin to establish rules, you and I go to work trying to find ways to get around those rules. This is a problem that James was having in the Jerusalem church, was that the influence in Jerusalem upon the church over which he was the leader was such that you had all these people, and they had these years and decades and centuries of the rules and following the rules, and then finding ways around those rules, and all of that came into his church. So when James would come up and see a problem going on in the church, he could confront it. He could say, hey, you should stop doing what you're doing. And that person would say, oh, but check it out. I have a perfect reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. And they would explain it, and according to the rule book, it would make perfect sense. So when James finally confronts this, when he says, listen, our purpose here is to follow Jesus. Our calling is to be who Jesus says we are. And so in order to do that, we have to follow him. So when he confronts this, he's drawing a big, fat line between religion and faith. Because they're two different things. Religion is this system over here, okay? And there are a lot of those. But faith over here is unique to the Christian. Because think about this. In no other religious category has the Creator, the God, the divine authority of that religion come to earth, walked among humanity, died, and come back to life and said, I've overcome everything. I have overcome your biggest problem. I've taken care of your rebellion. I've taken care of your fear of death. What lies beyond death is under my control, as I have just demonstrated to you. So just follow me. Just follow me. So the rules are over here. The rules are just follow God. So James is confronting things little by little, things that are destroying the life of his church. People are not having the best life that they could have because they're having problems because they're trying to bring rules in here. And the first thing that he brings up, he says, listen, you're showing favoritism based upon what's on the outside of people. Jesus says love your neighbor. He doesn't say only love your well-dressed neighbor. Jesus did not say, only love your neighbor who's got some dough. He says, love your neighbor, everybody. So what's going on in the church is that somebody, or a lot of somebodies, is showing favoritism. A rich person would come into the church, and the usher would walk them right up here to sit in the front so they could admire me in full. Okay, they would sit them right up here, while a poor, shabbily dressed person would sit back there. Not where you are, Ellie, of course, but right in the row in front of you, okay? So so they were dividing people based upon what's on the outside. Now think about this. If you are a rule operator, that makes perfect sense. The rich person who could conceivably do more for the church, who has a higher standing in culture, who's probably done better, whatever it is, it just makes perfect human sense to seat them in a better seat. Whereas the person who's maybe struggling in life, the person who hasn't followed the rules, is kind of having a hard time getting through the day, well, let's put them in the back. We won't exclude them from the fellowship, but we'll set them all back towards the back there. And James comes to his church. He says, you got to knock this off. This has to stop because you're breaking the only rule that Jesus gave you. You are not loving that neighbor and that neighbor the same way. You have divided them. You broke the rule. Now, you're going to try to get around it. You're going to try to justify it. But the only thing that Jesus said was love your neighbor. So that guy is no better than that guy back there. And so you showing favoritism demonstrates that you don't love God and you don't love your neighbor. And therefore you're creating a rule-based religion. You're creating a way of justifying your behavior. And if you do it about this, you'll do it about everything. So he said, let's get back to where things should be. Love that neighbor and that neighbor exactly the same. Now he anticipates that they're gonna have a little tizzy, that they're gonna try to justify things. But check this out. I'm going to jump up here to chapter 2 and verse 8. If you really keep the royal law found in Scripture, love your neighbor as yourself, you're doing okay. Well, you're doing right. But if you show favoritism, you sin and are convicted by the law as lawbreakers. Now listen to this, listen. Whoever keeps the whole law and yet stumbles at just one point, underline this, is guilty of breaking all of it. For he who said you shall not commit adultery also said you shall not murder. If you don't commit adultery, but you do commit murder, you become a lawbreaker. So we sing beautiful songs of praise to God. We have these wonderful prayers that are issued forth. We've sat and we have greeted one another. We have shown all kind of fellowship. But we put the rich person here and the poor person back there. That act right there destroys everything else that we do. You say, but that's not fair. Well, fair doesn't enter into it. Follow me is what Jesus says. Just follow me. And so unless we can find an instance where Jesus says, rich guys up here, poor guys back there, well, then we're not following the royal law. Love your neighbor. No matter how much we try to justify, no matter how much we try to make excuses, no matter how many good reasons we can come up with for doing what we do, unless everything we do honors God and honors our neighbor as ourselves, well, then we're guilty of the whole thing. And we're lawbreakers. It's pretty harsh, but it's true. It's true. And what it reflects is the complexity that we try to bring into our faith. We try to turn Christianity into this religious system. Show me the rules, show me the boundaries, and then I'll deal with it. But Jesus didn't give rules or boundaries. He said, here it is. Here's your commandment. Love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself. Period. And so those are our marching orders. That's the foundation of the church. That is something that you and I have to take by faith. That's something that you and I need to apply our lives. And every aspect of our life comes into the funnel of that commandment. Everything we do, in secret, in public, as a part of the fellowship or in the privacy of our home, everything we do gets funneled into that statement. Do you love your neighbor as yourself? And you say, well, I honored God. And he says, you can't honor God and dishonor your neighbors. Doesn't work. They are indivisible because, and this is where our trust in Jesus comes in, Jesus doesn't divide the two things. Jesus didn't come and spend his time in ministry going, listen, I honor God, but you guys are tweaking me. You guys are making me a little bit angry here. I don't love you so much. No. Jesus loved his disciples, his apostles later on, in the same way that he's loving God. He's honoring the Father. He's loving his guys. And he's trying to teach them the same thing. See how simple this is? We don't need to build some huge, complex set of rules. We don't have to have this system of codes and boundaries and the whole thing. All we have to do is love each other. So just go ahead and start. Just love one another. That's all we have to do. Just for today, love everybody in this room. Okay? I think that's within your scope of ability. Now, when you go home this afternoon, okay, and the neighbor's running his lawnmower next to you, and you don't want to hear it, don't curse him or her silently in your head. I know you would never say it out loud, but don't think it in your head. I'm trying to watch a baseball game here, and they got the lawnmower. No. Listen, Jesus loves that person and their lawnmower the same as he does your baseball game or your lunch or your nap. Whichever of the three that you elect to do. Love your neighbor as yourself. And you say, come on, Pastor, give us something easier. I can't give you anything easier than that. Love God and love your neighbor. Because ultimately, when we go back into the Gospels and we look at the life of Jesus, what is he doing to every person that he meets? He's loving them. He's showing the love of God to every person he meets. Even in those instances where it seems like he's being pretty tough. He's saying, look, you're failing. You're wrong. He's doing it in love. He's doing it. He's correcting things. He's confronting things. He's throwing tables over. He's doing all these things because he honors God and he loves these people. And he doesn't want people to be in rebellion against his Father who loves them. And so everything he does in life. So you're asking me now, what does this have to do with our best life? Well, this is the simplest one. Your best life is the one where you are living out the purpose that God has for you, living out the purpose for which God has created you. Your best life is not the one that you and I fashion for ourselves. It's not the one where we create rules and boundaries and codes and things like that. The best life that we can live is the one that demonstrates how we love God and we love our neighbors. And that's it. There's no other rules. There's no magic. There's no special sayings that I can give you. Love your neighbors, and that's your best life. Because you'll get along with your neighbors, right? You'll be friends. You'll love everybody. Your family, your friends, your neighbors, people that are not yet your friends, everybody. And if you honor God and love your neighbors, how great is life? How great is life? Trouble with that, of course, is that we have to have extraordinary faith in order to do that. Because, come on, I know what you're all thinking. Every time I say, hey, love your neighbors, and I've tried to look at every one of you, and I'm working around the room right now, okay, I've said, Jesus says, love your neighbors, and in your head, see, I can see what's in your head. Right now, in your head, you're saying, Jesus does not know my neighbors. See? I knew it. I knew it. I learned that from Johnny Carson when he did that envelope thing. You guys are too young to know who Johnny Carson... Anyway, all right, so... Jesus says, love your neighbors, and we're going, oh, he doesn't understand what I have to go through with my neighbors. They build enormous buildings right to the side of my house, blocking the view of the sun for half the day. They run their lawnmower while I'm trying to watch a baseball game or sleep, which is mostly the same thing, but yeah, okay. They do these things. If Jesus knew that, he'd give me a rule that says, okay, love everybody who's not running their lawnmower, right? Except, wait a minute. Later that same week, what are you going to be doing? You're going to be running your lawnmower, aren't you? And did you ever stop to think that your neighbor, your innocent neighbor who Jesus loves, is thinking the same thing about you? Why do they have to run their lawnmower? Why can't their... But you get what I'm saying, right? The thing is, remember going back to the categories of religion and authority and a problem, right? And then we build a category. Jesus knows all too well what our biggest problem is. We're in rebellion. So Jesus knows every neighbor, every family member, every son or daughter, every husband or wife that you and I will ever have or will ever know. He knows it because every human being, whoever did walk on this world, is walking, or will walk on this planet, has the same problem. And that is, we are in rebellion against the creator of the planet. We are against the creator of the universe. So that's our biggest problem. But Jesus solved the problem. He says, here's the solution to your rebellion. Just love everybody. Just love everybody. Regardless of what they do, regardless of what they can do for you. That was the issue with the rich guy and the poor guy. The rich guy, we think, can do more for me. So I love him a little bit more than the poor guy. But basically, no matter what somebody does to you, has done to you, will do to you, has thought about you, will think about, whatever, just simply love them. That's it. Just do that. You say, Pastor, how can I evaluate that? Here's the other part of the rules. We dig the rules because it's like a win-loss thing, okay? Either I did the rule or I didn't do the rule, so it's easy. I can get up tomorrow. I can get my checklist out. Did I? Yep. Didn't I? Oh, I failed on that one. So you know right away. You get immediate feedback that says, good life, bad life. You failed, so try again tomorrow. Press the reset and hope tomorrow comes and redo it there. But when our standard for living the best life is as simple as love your neighbors as yourself, now there's nothing to check off. Now there's no rule to go by. You actually have to get up each day and say, am I loving my neighbor from the minute I open my eyes until tonight when I close my eyes again? Am I loving my neighbor? And there's no range of loving your neighbor. There's no people that Jesus blocked out and said, all right, everybody except, that. Because listen, Jesus loved Judas, didn't he? He loved Judas, right? The guy he loved Judas. So there's no carve out for certain people. So no matter what your neighbors do, no matter who they are, no matter how they act, no matter what, Jesus says, follow me and love those people. So that's what I want you to do this week is, well, start with the people around. Start with the people that are immediately next to you. If you're sitting alone, think of somebody sitting next to you, okay? Yes, you need to love Leroy, okay? All right, and just during the day, don't think in terms of 10 or 15 or 100 commandments. Just simply say, how would Jesus love this person? Now, of course, if somebody cut off Jesus in traffic, I'm sure he would divinely drive them off. Probably not. No, Jesus would say, it's just traffic. It's just life. It's just money. It's just, your life is not rooted in the stuff of this world. Your life is not determined by the things that go on in this world. Your life is elevated. Your best life happens because you are named as a son or a daughter of God. Is there something better than that? Is there something in your mind that's better than being known as a son or daughter of God? I hope not. I dare not to think that you can think of something. So if that's it, if that's who you are, then our best life is living up to who we are. Our best life comes from being who Jesus said we are. Our best life comes from believing that Jesus was who he said he was, and that he did what he said he did, and that we are who he says we are, and that our life is what he says it is. That is the best life that any human being can attain to, because, look, go back to the categories at the very beginning. Jesus has identified who the divine authority is. Him, Jesus, God. That's the divine authority, and he has fixed our biggest problem. Our rebellion against that divine authority, against the God of the universe, Jesus has fixed that. So when he says, I fixed your biggest problem, and I've identified who the authority of the universe is, so what does he say? Follow me. Follow me. Live your life as you see me living life. And listen. If enough of us are willing to love our neighbors, regardless of what they do to us, what they may have done to us, what they can do for us, we put all those things aside. If we will simply love our neighbors as ourselves, watch, maybe even in our lifetime, our neighbors will begin to love us the way they love themselves. And think about how the world would be if everybody started loving each other the way that they love themselves. Every one of us, if that was to happen, every person on the planet would have the best life that they could possibly have.